Thank you, Wankeshi, and thank you so much for working so hard on pronouncing my name. You did a great job. Really, really excellent. Um, uh, I feel very positive about what's happening in Africa today around trade. I start with the fundamental belief that trade is good, that it creates wealth, and it, especially on the export side, it brings money back that can be used for roads, education, and it creates a very positive cycle through that education of trading, training more people to become involved with trading. I was inspired, not necessarily in a positive way, to start Global Chamber because I felt there were many problems with trade. Many companies can fail. There is an underappreciation typically for trade in most countries. And my starting point was exporters in the US. Only 12% of GDP in the US is exporting. Only 1 in 100 companies export. And I saw that as a lost opportunity. And so I was wondering how to improve that. And since I'm what I call part of the global tribe, more than just an American. I'm originally, my family is from Poland and Germany. I have traveled to 60 countries plus. I've lived in Japan and Singapore and spent most of my career in Asia through the DuPont company, polymers and chemicals and things like that. I'm originally a chemical engineer turned Globie. From all of that, I felt like there was an opportunity to improve things. And so I started Global Chamber chapters everywhere so that whoever in Africa, whatever country, whatever city, anywhere in the world wants to grow, their training is available, the contacts are available, and what we do is connect people every day to new clients. So I'll stop there, but I do believe in trade. I do believe that the AFC FTA is a key, very positive, huge step in the future. Having been involved with trade for 34 years, my first trip to South Korea was 34 years ago. I've had the benefit of history and seeing where South Korea and China were 34 years ago, not very far. And so they've made huge progress and come a long way. And I believe the same thing will become for Africa. And so hopefully I'll be around for 34 more years and see the benefits of all of this. So thank you for the opportunity to you and to Anne and to all the organizers. And I look forward to the conversation today. I think this kind of gets wrapped into the overall issue of transparency and the value of transparency that trade brings. I'll start with that question, and I'll build it out so that hopefully the other aspects of trade can be well understood, and we can all be working more aligned. On the transparency side, to have warm leads, you need trust. You need to know people that are good. And so when someone, for instance, introduced a lawyer, Nihi Sanusi from Throne Legal in Lagos, Nigeria, to us, I actually had the pleasure of connecting with him and then doing an onboarding as a new member the other day. And I could clearly see that he is professional, honest, ethical, in all of his mannerisms, the way he emails, the way he talks, the way he's humble. These are all things that are amazing about the best of the global tribe. And so when we meet these people and continue to build our database, those become the backbone of warmth, that we know and are confident that by making an introduction to a potential client or to a resource, we have the confidence. And if there's something that happens in the meantime that doesn't incite the confidence, then we get involved. So that's a key part of trust and our network. But more broadly, the issue of trade and transparency is so critical, I think, for the world. And some of the examples I would say is that we're seeing, for instance, Nigeria now really not as participant or as moving as fast as they really need to, but that will change. what happens in these trade agreements is issues come up along the way, and there are power structures that don't want change. They don't want to disrupt what's around. But ultimately, what happens is each country will become much more knowledgeable about what makes sense for my country. So SMEs look at opportunities. Wow, what are opportunities, different price points, different skills by country. And instead of every country trying to do everything, there's the benefit of countries now handling different parts of that. And one of a great example of that would be within the USMCA, what was called NAFTA, Mexico, US, Canada agreement, over 20, 30 years now. In the beginning, there were all sorts of battles and struggles, and now it's a well-oiled machine. It's a mega region. And one example of how that works would be 15 or so years ago, Mexico saw that there was an opportunity to have what's called nearshoring IT services into the US. So a lower cost IT talent in Mexico servicing US companies because it would be less expensive. The problem was there wasn't a pipeline of IT students. So some industrious SMEs and entrepreneurs said, well, let's work with the universities and build the talent pool to be able to supply that. So it took first, several years of, it takes 4 years to go through college, right? You've got to have the idea and the mindset. So it all begins with transparency. What are the opportunities? Second, how do we take advantage of it? In this case, let's get more students interested in IT in Mexico, which they did. Takes time, over 3, 4, 5, 10 years. Now, after 15 years, that's a huge industry for Mexico into the US, and it's a huge export. So these kinds of things through this transparency become apparent. So if you're an SME, keep your eyes open because these things will come up. If you're in the government, help your country, help your SMEs move things along, knock down barriers, remove corruption, remove all the things that are in the way of trade. It's really critically important. And if you're with a university or if you're in any of the ecosystems, you got to work together because it all starts with education and training, and it all works together in harmony. All of the success stories that I'm aware of over the last 30 years have required the connection between industry, universities, and government working together. And the more that happens in a positive way, the better it results in. One last point I wanted to make, and this is a really key point that I think I've noticed in Clubhouse. I try to make this point all the time in the Africa Clubhouse rooms. We talk about exporting, and Sarah mentioned about upgrading in the value chain, also critically important, not just raw materials, but keep the wealth within the country, build it up in manufacturing, and add wealth and value within the country. Really, really important. But another thing to think about is foreign direct investment is absolutely critical. In Africa, China has kind of disrupted things because you think, and I think, China has not necessarily done all the right things in terms of how they've foreign direct invested. But look what's happened in the US and in other countries, and I'll give you a data point. In the US, only 5% of US companies are foreign owned, 5%. They account for 20% of US exports. So what happens is these companies come in, typically, and excluding the China case, right? What we want to do in Africa, I think, is attract the right kind of foreign direct investment that will make product, technology, et cetera, and then ultimately also then export. So there's a strong link, or should be, between foreign direct investment and exporting. We want typically foreign direct investment as long as it's the right kind. So I wanted to make that point as well because it's an ecosystem. It all works together.
Absolutely. And actually, the whole FDI thing is a bit of a sore spot for me because I think that some of these benefits that are given to FDI should actually be opened up to local companies as well, where you're given a timeline that allows you to cumulatively invests that kind of money in the local economy, because it's just because it's not coming in as one lump sum doesn't mean that it's not going to make a difference. And anyway, so that continues to be a policy discussion here locally in Kenya. But
it's a big topic, right? You know, in terms of how a country should structure it. But I think there's no question that foreign direct investment is key. Each country needs to decide what to do with it. When you look at South Korea and China, both of those countries developed, even Japan to a large extent, developed without a lot of foreign direct investment. They did it by really focusing effort, creating some imbalances and giving their companies advantages around their exporting and supporting them. And so it really, you bring up a really good point, and one that I totally agree with. Each country needs to have its own strategy, and we have a role in that. You know, I know in Africa and many governments, it's hard to have that conversation, and there's a lot of other factors going on. But I think over the next 10, 20, 30 years, it's critical that we all, within our own countries, get involved in that process. I think with AFCFTA, it's a beginning. And just like NAFTA was a beginning for US, Canada, Mexico, you know, what's going to happen over the next 10, 20 years will evolve and change. And so I think the first step is, let's work together. Let's get the systems in place. Let's bring Nigeria in. Let's get a lot of the other issues going. You know, I think, you know, weaving, you know, climate change and how that the impact of that and having impact on that probably won't be in play for a while until a lot of these other systems come into place. In the case of in the US, NAFTA, now USMCA, there had started to become some of those agreements. Same with the CPTPP in the Pacific. There are elements of those agreements that have now started to address that. So I think it's an evolution. And so when we have this conversation in 10 years, probably AFCFTA will be saying, well, the next one, the next agreement will have these elements in it. In the meantime, you know, entrepreneurs will move ahead. They'll find opportunities. They'll create products and services that make sense. And the governments will hopefully catch up with those and start to implement, you know, overall structures that help support more of their success. And so I would say they're related, but for AFCFTA, I think it's probably a little bit further down the road in terms of where the impact will be on that particular topic. There's a lot more other progress that's going to happen over the next several years.